Okay. Big turnout today. I got a bunch of emails that people were sick, so hopefully that's all it is. But those of you who are here, how are we doing today?
Have a midterm.
I'm sorry?
Have a midterm later on.
You have a midterm? In what? In what?
Physics.
Are you nervous?
I'm
Or
dying.
just tired?
I'm just dying.
Okay. Other folks, how are we doing today? Some thumbs up. Thumbs medium is definitely a way to be this time of the semester. Okay. Let's see. So first, as a reminder, Polyphony is away this week, so there are no discussion sections tomorrow. Those are just canceled. There's no 2-sentence paper you have to worry about or anything like that. Next, the finding arguments assignment. The original due date I set up was for tomorrow, thinking a week would be a good amount of time to for y'all to finish this, and it would keep stuff from getting backed up later in the semester when we're actually going to have, like, things are going to get busier as we go on. So I set the original due date for tomorrow, and because discussions were canceled, you do have the time tomorrow where everyone in your group can get together at the same time and maybe potentially finish these up. The rooms will still be like unlocked and stuff. You can go there and work together, or you can find some other place to meet up during your discussion time. So the original due date for the assignment was set to tomorrow, but it occurred to me after class last Thursday, because you all didn't get as much time in class to work on it as I'd hoped. It might make sense to push the due date back. Was that consensus or just tiredness? Say again? Tiredness, okay. Okay, so how are your groups doing in terms of this assignment? Are you pretty much finished? You can finish tomorrow, or would an extra week really help you out to finish this assignment? Yes? No? We're just totally exhausted this morning. Zunya?
I just feel like a week will definitely help us a lot, but you guys saying a lot of people are sick, and I don't think we'll be able to meet up with our roommates since they're just disappeared.
Okay, so I missed part of that because of my phone rang. I apologize for that. So you were saying people are sick, and then there was something else that I missed.
And I just don't believe that we are able to, have a group work today.
Okay,
Well, not tomorrow for us, but
okay. Other thoughts? Preferences? Yeah, Eric? An extra week?
Because I don't think it would necessarily push out the entire course schedule.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to move. We'll talk about difficult conversation number 1 in a second. Yeah, I just want to be careful. I'm not pushing too much stuff back because it will start to get busier. Yeah, Freddie.
I was just going to say, push it to Monday so we have the weekend to work on it.
I'm sorry? Yeah. So Monday instead of this Friday or next Friday. Xenia seems okay with that. Bunch of people just walked in. Glad you're here, at least. Okay, so maybe what I could do is I will move the due date to Monday, and then we'll do another quick check-in at the start of class next Tuesday, so that if you're like, no, people were just too sick over the weekend or whatever, too stressed out from midterms, and you really do need like the whole extra week, then we can bump it back again. I will bring this up. Okay, I will have this up as a reminder that I need to update the due date. Okay, good. So so the due date for this will be moved to Monday, and if things really don't work out for you with the extra few days, let me know Tuesday morning, and we can move it back again. Okay. So then the other reminder for the other outstanding assignment is the difficult conversation number 1 assignment, which is due next Friday. So the check-in here, has everybody had a chance to connect with their partner or the group of 3? You've at least like figured out the topic, maybe had the first conversation. Is that where people are? I see some thumbs up, some nods. Okay, not yet. Okay. Are people feeling like you can do all the various, like, has everyone looked through the various steps of the assignment and feels like from where you are, you could finish it by next week, or is this something we need to bump back as well? And no one wants to argue for keeping the due date where it is.
See, I'm just suddenly a lot less stressed and more free because I already, well, to be fair, the entire class failed our physics exam the other day.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Not a single person finished ahead of schedule. I was too in my own head, but some of my friends told me that there was an audible gasp in the room when the professor said, "That's time, pencils down."
Oh, okay. Wonder what happened there.
What happened there is our professor was overconfident in us, unfortunately.
It is tricky to get the timing for things. Anyways, so difficult conversation. Are folks feeling like this is something you could finish up next week, or is this something we may need to push back as well? Oakley, you have a complex expression.
I'm like so on it because I have a test the same day as it.
Sorry, say that one more
I
time.
have a test like the same day of it, so I'm thinking of like I don't think those will really collide. I just have to. I'm thinking about how I'm gonna split up my studying and then
You have to do the time management stuff.
yeah, the time management.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it'll work out.
Okay. Yeah, Eric?
For the difficult conversation,
Uh-huh.
I feel like we should keep the current schedule because I believe the current one is already has been pushed back once.
I don't remember whether it got pushed back already or not. The reason why I'm hesitant, you can see this on the schedule real quick, just so you all understand what's on my mind. We don't want to spend too much more time on this. So we are here in this week on the schedule. Let me make this a little larger. We're here right now in week 6. This is next week. And then after that, we start to have more substantial assignments due every couple of weeks. And then when we get into the end of the semester, there's some of this writing you're going to be doing in class. But like we have to stick to a schedule for like some aspects of how the paper is going to work. And then there's stuff that's due at the very end, especially if you're going for an A. So this is why I'm hesitant. If we push the difficult conversation back one, then you might need more time for this argument analysis, and then stuff just gets piled up into late April and early May when everybody is exhausted and doesn't want more work. So it sounds like I'm not hearing a really strong push for adjusting the due date for the difficult conversation back. This is the kind of thing where, if you get it in a day late, there's not going to be a penalty. I just don't want you to fall behind in the schedule. So we will go ahead and leave difficult conversation number 1 with its due date for next week. Are there any questions about logistics?
We're having the argument on the route.
Do you mean the difficult conversation assignment, or? Yes. Yeah, all of that happens on a schedule you work out with your partner. Yeah. Okay. So this week, as a reminder, we are thinking about the role of large language models in college classes pretty generally, a little bit, but our goal is to develop a policy for our class in particular. And so last time, I had you all brainstorm all of these scenarios, which were really interesting. So thank you for that. I reorganized them so you had written them down, like your group took like 3 or 4 consecutive lines, and that's totally fine. I reorganized them here by level. So like all of the stuff you put on level 1 is up here. Lots of brainstorming, 1 for feedback, 1 for co-create and advise and revise, and then a few for unrestricted. I did this because it makes it easy to sort of scan, like, okay, organizational, people seem to think it's appropriate. With some of the later ones, people have more conditions. So I looked these over, and what I see looking at the scenarios, but then also the conditions you put on them, and to some extent the justifications you gave, it seems like you all agree that it's generally acceptable to use an LLM for personal use when it's not material that you turn in. So, for example, things like reviewing the textbook, which is actually something that LLMs can't do with our textbook in a straightforward way. Like, there is a way you can get it to be able to see the textbook for a class, but it actually takes some work. Asking the LLM to find sources for an argument, which is actually something that LLMs aren't great at, and it depends a lot on the platform as well. This is actually something we're going to be talking about later in the semester. We're going to have a whole in-class activity related to asking LLMs to find sources. But when it's for personal use, not material you're turning in, seems to be, you all agree that's totally fine, at least in principle. Explaining, clarifying instructions on an assignment. This was an interesting one. Debating with an LLM to uncover more sides to an issue. Trying to think about what are other perspectives you might potentially bring in to an argument, analysis, or a paper or something like that. And then what I'm calling triaging potential arguments. That is the stuff we were talking about last week, where you find like an opinion piece and it's a little bit long. You need to figure out whether or not it has a clear conclusion and then an argument for that conclusion that you can analyze. And is it giving the right kind of argument for the specific assignment? That's going to be an issue with these argument analysis assignments later on. You can do this triaging process with the support of an LLM. So that's not something that needs to go into the thing that you turn in. It's screening or trying to figure out, is this an appropriate argument for me to work with? So again, these things, these personal uses, maybe aspects of certain assignments that you don't turn in, seemed like people agreed these were generally acceptable. Is that where we are? Shrug? Is the shrug a maybe? The shrug is I have some concerns? Or is the shrug, I'm too preoccupied because my class failed the physics exam?
Hopefully it'll be heard. No, that shrug was, maybe that's where the class is. I'm still of the opinion that, kind of out of principle's sake, AI just shouldn't be permitted.
Okay.
Whether or not, I mean, for use in a classroom or in general, is up to interpretation.
Okay. Eric?
Disagree.
Okay.
That's fine, because I personally see AI as a tool, not just something like, that's bad. It should be like, I don't know, prison or something.
Oh, so like you
It-
disagree with Duncan that you think there are some legitimate uses. So Duncan's position is no legitimate uses whatsoever. You're saying, yeah, you disagree. You think there are some legitimate uses. Do you disagree with what's up on the slide?
I agree with those.
You agree with those? Okay. Devin, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna ask Duncan to clarify what you mean by in general.
The only situation in which I think the usage of large language models is permissible is for things that cannot be accomplished within a humanly feasible time frame otherwise. So, for example, when it comes to specifically LLMs, if you wanted to create real-time generative dialogue in a video game, you cannot do that unless you are willing to employ a team of like 24 writers, 24/7, for each person playing that game. Otherwise, I have ethical concerns about the development and training of AI. I have practical concerns about humans giving away more and more autonomy to these systems, which is something that is already occurring. I have additional practical concerns about what if it does the same thing that spell checkers do, which I wrote in the prerequisite write a paragraph thing of the more you use tools that reduce the labor that you do, the less good you are at doing that labor. Like, how good are any of us at building a car?
Really good.
But point is, it doesn't matter if they're a useful tool. It's going to make you worse at doing critical thinking tasks if you offload critical thinking on a regular basis to something that isn't you.
So you think there's a moral and ethical issue if I ask an LLM to just make a poem, not for any reason, I just want it to make a poem?
I think there's an ethical issue with how every currently on the market LLM has been trained.
Ruby and then Eric?
So do you think that, like, for studying, you shouldn't use it?
Yes.
Why?
Because again, it's going to make you worse at studying by using it in the same way that spell checkers have been tested and shown that they will make you worse at spelling if you use them consistently. But also again, the ethical concern stands of every currently on the market LLM has been trained on the copyrighted works of millions of authors without their permission and is being used to reduce their ability to sell their works. Like, it is a clear attempt to just remove an entire class of workers and force them into unemployment. By using an LLM, even if you're using it for free, you're supporting their user statistics. And unless you really make a impressive effort to use it as much as possible to cost them as much money as you can through electricity, you are benefiting a company that is actively undermining copyright law, independent authors, and their ability to make a living.
Okay. Eric, then Oakley?
So, although you haven't said it word for word, I'm assuming that you're saying we shouldn't be using AIs in terms of the educational field, and not just only the educational field, but in general, because of ethical issues, and that you're not going to learn anything. I'm assuming that's your
You
argument.
will learn something.
Hands. Oakley's next.
Not saying that I disagree with you on LLMs. I don't support LLMs either. But when it came to the study thing, remember how last class I was talking about how you use it to like ask different questions or be able to study them more? Would you say that's still like
It is an understandable use, but again, none of this addresses the fundamental concern of the manner in which these LLMs were created is a violation of copyright law and not just of big companies we don't care too much about, but of small authors, of fandoms, of every single thing you can train an AI on has been scraped and scrubbed from the internet for the purposes of company making money.
So,
Okay, hold on.
Also, in reply to your thing, I personally don't like the development of AI. I've been following it since like 2013. I find it to be a very interesting field. I would be thrilled if every single AI company shuttered its doors 5 years ago. I'd be thrilled even if they just stopped now. I think it is a very bad idea for a litany of reasons. I could
Hold
go
on.
into more sci-fi things, but that's not relevant to current conversational topics.
Is permissible. There we go. Okay. So the conclusion we're debating over right now is whether some uses of LLMs are permissible. And the argument we're getting from, say, we've heard this from Ruby, we've heard this from Oakley, is LLMs can be helpful when studying. There were specifics, but I'm trying to move quickly. So we get an argument along these lines in support of, oh, come on. We get supportive arguments along these lines. And that is blue, and this is blue, and this is blue. Okay. So we have this argument for one side of this debate. Duncan, so LLM training violates copyright and is bad for creatives. This is an argument from the other side, so we're going to put it in red. How does Duncan's argument, that's tiny, let me zoom in. How does Duncan's argument relate to the studying argument? Oh, there is some relation. There's that. We have something more precise we can say. Ayush?
It disputes the conclusion that some uses of LLMs are permissible, and making
Good.
the argument that LLMs in and of themselves are not ethical to use because of their shady origins.
Yeah. So it goes like this, and it's dashed. So with this version of the conclusion, what do we call, what type of counter-argument, I don't like that word, but what type of counter-argument is Duncan giving to this version of the conclusion? Deb? This is an opposing argument, right? An opposing argument challenges the conclusion. So Duncan's argument about copyright violation doesn't address the point about LLMs can be helpful when studying. But conversely, saying that LLMs can be helpful for studying also doesn't address the copyright argument. So this is why in philosophy, like, yeah, there are opposing arguments, but the real action is with objections. So Duncan actually offered an objection to the studying argument a little while ago. Does anyone remember what that was? Yes, I know you remember. I'm trying to bring in more people. Ayush.
He also made the argument that LLMs can degrade your ability to study properly and form arguments by doing a lot of the intellectual work for you.
Yes. Okay, so LLMs make you worse at studying was the way that Duncan put it. And it's also going to go like this. On what?
There's like 3 asterisks on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I want to try to move on in 10 minutes or less, so I'm using super simplified versions. So we have an objection here to the studying argument. I think the blue side in this debate, rather than reiterating the idea that LLMs can be helpful when studying, needs to either reply to Duncan's argument, needs to challenge the idea that LLMs make you worse at studying, or needs to give an objection to the copyright argument. I think that's the situation. Jonathan, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, so I don't really have a particular comment on the exact argument I've got right now. I had something else I wanted to add. Now that the argument map, I don't know where it would go.
Okay.
And I think that this argument would end up following the same logic as the argument for veganism and not eating meat. Where people have their own ideals, and the problem is they cannot, they have opinions on a base idea that is not changed by the other party, and so they just make their own choice to not eat meat, or in this case, not use LLMs, while the other party still participates in that activity. So it's like, it's not a conclusion that ends in a yes, no. It ends in a differing of actions based on opinion. So I feel like people who like want to see the future of LLMs will continue to use them regardless of what anyone else thinks. People who think LLMs are bad are going to continue to stray away from them and say that they're bad.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I don't know where that would go. That's not really
I'm going to make this purple, actually. Or, no, let's make it green. No, let's make it purple. Which purple? Is it that purple? No. That's like that purple. Okay. So this is an analogy with vegetarianism. And the idea is, this is probably going to be ridiculously oversimplistic, but I'm going to try it first, and then we're going to see if we can get to a more accurate version of the idea. Let's say personal judgment. Morality is a matter of personal judgment. It's up to you to be vegetarian or not. It's up to you whether or not LLMs are permissible. Does anyone have a sense of why I made this purple rather than blue or red? Oakley.
So it's neither an argument nor is it supporting the conclusion.
Yeah, it has this weird fit with sort of the red versus blue setup of the debate. Jonathan? Maybe it's, I mean, it could be like, this is the way we're going to live. Okay. So back in, I'm going to forget the century. We have the Protestant Reformation in Europe in, I want to say, the 1500s. Okay. We get sort of a wave of rebellion against the Catholic Church, which was basically identical with Christianity, at least in Europe at that point in time. Okay, so we get the Protestant Reformation. And people react to this by basically going to war for like 150 years. Incredibly violent religious warfare. Like monarchies are overthrown. There are like weird dictatorships. Like Great Britain was actually under a Republican dictatorship for like 50 years as a result of these religious wars. This leads directly into sort of fundamental ideals in things like the Declaration of Independence. Sort of philosophical background there is the idea that, okay, if we have an officially recognized state religion that's going to lead to these civil wars and like people invading us because they want us to be Catholic or they want us to be Protestant or something like this. And so we'll just sort of live and let live when it comes to religion. The fancy Latin term here is modus vivendi, which means a way of living. So the idea is, this is a way we can live together in peace. We disagree about religion, that's fine. You do religion your way, I do religion my way. And so religion is just a matter of personal judgment. That's, the United States from sort of the founding through the 19th century. In the 20th century, this sort of expands to moral questions more general. So questions like whether or not you should be vegetarian, and this question we're debating about here about whether or not some uses of LLMs are permissible. This is a moral question. And so the veganism analogy is saying, well, like religion, you can be Protestant or Catholic or Muslim or Hindu or Jewish or none of the above. Just like religion is a matter of personal judgment, a common idea in our society now is morality is a matter of personal judgment. And so the whole business on the right-hand side here about trying to debate whether some uses of LLMs are permissible, it's as irrelevant as trying to debate over Catholicism versus Protestantism or pineapple on pizza. It's just a matter of personal opinion. Duncan?
We must move on, and I will be quiet if that's what you were trying to do. But I object to this compromise. Multiple grounds.
Yeah.
Spiritual matters are one thing. Your belief in the existence of a higher power and which higher power you care for affects the material plane not. But in the case that we are specifically discussing here, every time you use a large language model to generate text, that is using energy somewhere, and not an insubstantial amount of it. I remember the outcry that was associated with the amount of energy being burned in order to make cryptocurrencies exist.
Okay,
This is a
I'm
comparable amount.
going to cut you off because we do need to move on. And that is a separate argument, right? The climate concerns about LLMs are separate from the arguments that we have up on the board so far. It is an argument we could put up on the board. I just don't want to stick with this sort of really broad debate for too long. Your argument, though, is morality is not a matter of personal judgment because it affects other people. Roughly. Yeah. And so it matters. It's not just a matter of personal judgment whether some uses of LLMs are permissible. This is the same view that people had about religion. This is why they fought wars over religion, because they thought it really mattered whether you believed that the communion or the Eucharist wafer was in some metaphysical sense actually the body of Christ. They thought this had real significance in our lives. As a result of saying religion is just a matter of personal judgment, we now live in a society where religion doesn't play a big role in politics or social discourse anymore. Like, you can have your personal argument, but that's not going to be compelling to anybody else. And what I want to leave with here, when we set morality as just a matter of personal judgment, we end up with a society where we can't use morality to make these kinds of decisions anymore. because the effect of that purple argument is to wipe out everything else. The effect of the purple argument is to say, it doesn't matter whether LLMs can be helpful when studying, whether they violate copyright, whether they have these climate effects. It's all just a matter of what you want to do. OK, that is enough of my editorial. I'm afraid we need to move on. Is it about something else?
Yeah.
OK.
So, like in this conversation, we were making a bunch of like premises that fit in like one box.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like when you're having a discussion where it would be two premises grouped together?
We saw a little bit of that last week.
Because like I know you showed examples, but I was
Yeah.
in an actual conversation.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So we had sort of stuff like this last week, right? These sort of complex multi-step arguments which have like sub-conclusions and things like this. And then what does the debate map start to look like? The debate map starts to look complex in similar ways, right? So you can imagine if we just had the bottom part of the argument here, someone might have an objection, say, to premise 6. Shutting TikTok down would resolve the legal gray area. Someone might have an objection to that premise, and we would get sort of a tree that builds up from there, but like alternating red and blue, rather than just all being blue. That's my attempt at a quick answer. Oakley, is it on something else?
It's kind of a similar question because
Okay.
I was wondering, like
Yeah.
theoretically, that like the energy pollution we brought into it, would it be a box like this because it's not exactly relating to either of the arguments in the original map? Or
So the climate or the energy concerns would be a separate opposing argument to this conclusion. Yeah. OK. Good. OK, so back to where we were, with the proviso that there are arguments that any use of LLMs is morally permissible. That is an opinion worth debating, but it is a possibility that I'm not going to build in, that I don't want to build into the course policy. So for our purposes, recognizing that some people might disagree with Duncan's arguments and might still want to use LLMs, it seems like these personal uses are generally taken as acceptable. Where I found disagreement, or things that we might want to debate some more, are 4 types of scenarios that showed up in the ones that you generated. So the heads here are sort of my paraphrases or my summary versions. And then the smaller text is like copied and pasted from your scenarios. So writing a summary of a long argument for use in an assignment. So part of the argument analysis is you give us a link to something, and then you give a prose version. And sometimes that prose version can be a summary of, say, the whole TikTok editorial. If that's what you want to analyze, include a 1-paragraph summary of it. Next, generating an argument sort of from scratch. So some people talked about like using this as practice. Other people talked about if you wanted to like understand an argument type more, you could have the LLM generate a bunch of examples. I think the interesting possibility here is generating an argument from scratch. So you go to like ChatGPT and say, give me an argument by example. And then you take that and you put that in the assignment, and that's the argument that you analyze and you turn in. Generating an objection to an argument, sort of based on the steps that you've done to take the argument wherever it came from, put it in premise conclusion form, analyze the premises, and then one of the final steps is to generate an objection and reply. So the possibility here is having an LLM generate that objection for you. And then fourth, checking your work. The possibility in the scenario was like you give the LLM the same argument, I think, and ask it to do the analysis, and then you compare to what you wrote. I guess another possibility here would be you do it yourself, and then you ask for feedback. I forget now where I was going with this sentence. But OK, so we have these 4 scenarios where it seemed like there might be potential disagreement over whether these kinds of uses are acceptable, unacceptable, or acceptable with conditions. Okay. Since our time is limited, what I would like your group to do is pick one of these that wasn't one you talked about on Tuesday. So something another group came up with. And discuss among yourselves whether you think this use could be, for the purposes of setting class policy, whether this use could be acceptable, acceptable with conditions, or unacceptable. Is the question clear? OK. Okay, let's come back together. Ooh. Any thoughts on the first one? Writing a summary of a long argument for use in an assignment. I know this table talked about that. What did you all say?
We said that it's okay in some circumstances,
Uh-huh.
depending on what you mean, because if you read the original argument too and understand it, it's fine to produce a summary for the purpose of analysis, just to see if you can, make things more clear. But actually, now that I'm saying that, that might degrade your own argument skills. Crap. Yeah, I guess it's not permissible then. Yeah, if you use it to produce a summary for the purpose of analysis, you aren't really improving your own analytical skills. And if you just use the summary to understand the argument, you're degrading your own ability to understand raw arguments themselves.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem like it's going to be good for you.
Okay. Jonathan?
I think that for use in an assignment is like
Mm-hmm.
clashing with what is said right under it, where it says ease of reading information. I think that feels like it's saying to turn in part of it as an assignment, which I wouldn't agree with. So like for
Okay.
use in an assignment, no, but for ease of reading, like if someone has like a really long document,
Mm-hmm.
or it's like just not written really well and it's hard to understand,
Yeah.
having it be summarized would be helpful.
That interpretation of the scenario where it's for your own personal use outside of class, not something you're turning in for class, I took that as falling under this, generally acceptable. I thought the interesting one was writing a summary for use in an assignment.
Like to turn in.
Yeah.
No.
Then no.
I don't know if that's acceptable.
Okay. This sounds like not acceptable. Interesting. About generating an argument for use in an assignment. So you need to do an analysis of an argument by example. And you go to the LLM and you ask it, can you generate for me an argument by example? And then you take it and you do the analysis from there. Did any table talk about this? Well, I know 2 did. Anybody else talk about this? Okay, so 2, what did you say about this?
I mean, I think we discussed the one that was directly above this, but I can tell you what I think of this.
Oh, I thought you said you were specifically looking at like this or something.
We were working on the rewriting one. Again, I can tell you what I think of that one, but I'm not sure if you'll be surprised by my conclusion.
Yeah. Okay, so did nobody talk about generating an argument? Yeah.
You talked about it like originally when we made the file.
Okay.
I think we thought it was like acceptable
Uh-huh.
unless you put like in the instructions it's written that you need to go and find it from like the news. But if it's not written, we thought it was acceptable because it's just like the initial instructions into the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not any part that's getting turned in.
Okay, so the argument is, so long as it's allowed by me, the instructor, on the assignment, you're just going out and it's no different from going out and finding an argument like in an opinion piece in the newspaper. You're still doing the work of analyzing it yourself. That's the idea?
Yeah, the analyzing part is the assignment, not really the finding part.
Okay. I saw Jonathan first, but then Oakley.
So I think for this specific one,
Uh-huh.
if you permit it, like this use in
Uh-huh.
assignment, and from that generated argument,
Mhm.
you can get the sources used, because that's where the information was pulled from, online sources. If you can get those sources and look at those sources yourself to identify their credibility and like, use in the argument, then not turning it in directly, but using the argument provided as a would be acceptable,
Okay.
but only under those conditions.
So the condition you want to add is you can find the source of the example. Okay.
So it's like basically using it for ease of source location rather than generating an argument for you.
Okay, yeah. So a note I made on the slide before was that LLMs are actually really bad at that. They're not search engines. And we're going to talk about that in like 6 weeks or something, not anytime soon. But it is something they're not great at. And also, it differs a lot actually between systems. Whether they can sort of give you sources or something that looks like sources. It's weird. So given that an LLM can't really give you sources because it's not a search engine, it's just doing a different kind of thing. So you can't trace it back generally. Would you say acceptable or unacceptable? Unacceptable because you can't really trace it back.
Yes.
Okay, Oakley?
I was gonna say that generating an argument for using an assignment is unacceptable because in the finding arguments assignment that we have,
Yeah.
you say to like spend 1 to 2 hours just looking for arguments in general,
Mm-hmm.
and using an LLM is basically just giving you that right away.
Uh-huh.
Instead of you looking through different options, it's kind of just being fed to you, like, oh, here, use this. And I don't know, I feel like a bit of it is plagiarism because you're not exactly, in the scenario that you go to like an article and you find it, you're able to cite that. Even if
Okay.
you do cite an LLM, I don't think it's exactly your own work, if that makes sense.
Well, but you know, the opinion piece you read isn't your own work.
Yeah, but the thing of like, oh, like analyzing an article piece is something that someone else has written,
Uh-huh.
whereas an LLM is just, it's AI that's generating stuff.
Okay. Is it Mike? Yeah, go for it.
My opinion on it is acceptable in some situations
Okay.
where, like you said, where if you completely say not to use it, strictly not to use it.
Uh-huh.
But I use it as a tool for my assignments and for my like use of it. I can like find not an argument, but let's say in this case, if I'm looking for an argument,
Uh-huh.
I can find one and relate it back to a source that is highly reputable. And I think you can find a source and it's like you can actually like take the source from ChatGPT or like an LLM.
Okay. So that sounds like using it like a search engine.
Yeah,
Is sort of the case.
use it in some sort of way like that.
So if you can use it like a search engine, then it's like a search engine. But I've been arguing you can't really use it like a search engine, at least not reliably. Devin?
I don't know if it's like, I don't know. What I was thinking is if the assignment is like, use this kind of argument and analyze it,
Uh-huh.
right? I don't see too much difference. I know there is a difference, but if you just go to someone and say, hey, can you think of an argument like this for me to analyze?
Mm-hmm.
And they just think of something that they've made up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see too much difference between using like an LLM because if you ask that person to cite where they got that argument from,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna be like, I don't know, I just made it up. And so I think, I'm not saying that for like every assignment or like
Mm-hmm.
for everything. I'm just saying like in very specific circumstances, I can see similarities between just asking like your parent or friend for an example.
Okay. Freddie?
I feel like it's not acceptable because if you're generating arguments, you're losing out on like the human factor of the author who wrote them or consider them, and you're losing that sort of context that isn't provided by a language model.
Okay. So you're saying if you rely on the LLM generated one, you're losing something human about the author of quote unquote a real opinion piece. Okay. Oakley, a few minutes ago, it seemed like you were trying to figure out a way to say something about like the value of going and looking for the argument yourself. Is it related to what Freddie was saying, or is it something else?
I'll be honest, I kind of zoned out. I did not hear what he said.
Okay. Do you want to try again real quick, Freddie? Like one sentence?
I was just saying that if you generate an argument, you're losing on the context of the human author who wrote the original argument, because that isn't provided by a language model. You don't have that experience of the author's, like the experience of the author's life backing up the argument that they're trying to prove.
Okay, is that similar to what you had in mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, and then I think we will need to do a vote on this one. You're good? Okay. So we have an array of arguments on either side of this one. I don't hear a position that's like acceptable with conditions, except for like the using it as a search engine thing, which for reasons we're going to talk about in like 6 weeks, I don't think generally applies. So either the arguments on the table have the conclusion that either it's acceptable because it's not really different from getting an argument from any other source for doing the analysis, versus unacceptable because there's some value in going out and finding the source and reading another person's argument. I think those are the two main positions on the table. So I'm going to ask for a vote. Just a quick show of hands. And we will go with the majority position. And if no one gets a majority, then I will figure out what to do. Okay. So first, raise your hand if you want this use to be... Raise your hand if you think it's acceptable. Raise your hand if you think it's unacceptable. Okay, so that would be unacceptable. Yes. So quickly and quietly pack up your things. I believe we're supposed to go out to the quad. Stay together. I'm going to do a quick count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18.